So, what could go wrong with a 90-year-old car? Well, it all started because I was really tired of cranking this thing to try to get it running. And it was always a chore. And the starter would no longer turn the engine over. So, even with a new Bendix. So I decided I was going to have to fix that. So I knew there was a problem with the ring gear. So when I got everything apart, even before, and you probably saw this earlier in one of the earlier videos, here's the teeth on this ring gear. Now they're worn pretty thin and they're chunking off here. But if you look at from here on around here, you can see how all those teeth right there just laid over from trying to crank it. So, what could go wrong? Well, there's the first thing that could go wrong. So I had to tear the transmission apart in order to get the ring gear because it's held on by 16 brass screws that go through the little stands that hold the magnets for the magneto. Now you see these are all shiny here where I removed these screws. The reason I did that was just to grind off the end of the screws because they're tapped on there to where they're mushroomed over, and I'll guarantee you a screw will not come out until you remove those or grind off those mushroomed bottoms on those screws. So that was really the thing that started it all. So from there, you just start taking things apart. We got the oil pan there, and we'll get over here. We'll get that hog's head in the light here before long. But just to go on with all the different pieces, I found the reverse drum was actually cracked, so I'm going to have a replacement for that. Now, crack isn't that easy to see, but it's definitely there. There we go. Get it in the light here. The crack, there's one crack right there that goes up into, almost into the outer part of the drum itself. There's another crack right in here that goes through there. And I'm pretty sure that I saw another one. It's really hard to see sometimes, but you can look right here. There you go on this side. And you can see the difference in the color. This is clean, and this over here has still got a little dirt on it, but you can clearly see that crack that runs from here on over to there. So, definitely, in this case, it is time for drum. So, not a big deal, just money. Now I want to go over and show you the 26 and 27 brake drums. Actually held the clutches in a bit different than the older ones. You look in here, you can see how they've got actually inserts on there that keep those clutches from cutting into the drum itself. So really a good idea there that the Henry had. But I have only, and these can be replaced, which is a good thing because I actually have one missing there, and here it is right here. It's actually broken off. Well, there's the other one. Then of course getting into the thing, I knew the mag was pretty iffy. It did run on the mag, but it was really rough. Well, if you look around this thing, you'll see that in a lot of places it is missing insulation. And another thing I discovered was that on the flywheel side, that when I put this engine up on its nose, the magnets were actually touching that, and I have 43 thousandths end play on that crankshaft. So more attention. And then on this drum right here, which seems to not be available anywhere, so a person would have to, if he had any kind of a problem with this one, you'd have to find a used one somewhere. And this one actually does have a little bit of a problem, and I'm actually hoping that it is not this surface in here, but that it is the surface here. It's something, it has spun here, and this is really rough right here. And when this drum is down where it should be, it's actually loose on this shaft. And everything I've seen, it is not supposed to be loose. So there's, looks like time to replace the shaft. And when we look at the pins here on for the fingers on the clutch, it might be hard to see, but they're actually pretty worn, so those are replaceable. That's not a big problem there. And the clutches, and wouldn't hurt to put a new set of clutches in. Now the Bendix, I replaced that. It's hardly started the car more than 3 or 4 times. Alright, now all of this was fine. I'm going to go ahead and replace that spring. Just because now's the time. I'm going to replace these 3 thrust washers. That gear is good. Now one thing I ran into on this gear right here, I can just pull that bushing right on out. So, of course I'm hoping that it's the bushing and not the gear, because the gear is in otherwise decent shape. So I'm going to pick up bushings, and probably in the meantime I'll just push one out and then put it in there and see if it's tight or not. So, and then we got all of our nuts and bolts, and of course they're in good shape. My keys are in good shape. I won't have to worry about them. It's not the cheap stuff I need, it's the expensive stuff. So, and then I don't know, it looks like some homemade washers here for the low gear. And I noticed that these cams, or whatever they call these, are worn on all of these. My springs are shot. These little lock washers are pretty far gone. These lock washers are, they do hold, but I noticed they were really out of whack. And when I looked at the bands are just almost worn out near the top, and hardly anywhere at all on the bottom. Well, what in the world could cause a thing like that? Well, see, this one's all very, very thin here. Very, very thin there. Might be hard to see on the camera, but it's got plenty of material around here on the bottom. Well, the problem is when these cams get worn, and also on the low gear and the clutch, they're on the inside. It takes a lot more to get them out of there. But when those things get worn, then they don't allow the bands to pull in right. You actually have to make them tighter to make them function. And what happens is they wear out on the sides or at the top near the springs and really don't pull very hard or clamp very hard at the bottom side. So there is that little detail. And now I'm going to go ahead and clear the table enough where I can get that hogshead up here, and we can take a look at just exactly what's up inside of that. So we'll be back in just a minute. So we're back again. I've got the hogshead up here on the table, and so you can see different pieces. I still got a lot of cleaning up to do, but I got it clean enough where I can, look everything over and see just what we've got here. So some of it looks pretty good, nice and tight. And then when I get over here to the clutch and low, you can see how this hole is almost worn through. That can be fixed. But when I get into this, there's quite a bit of play there. Now, I don't know if I can shim that up. They do make an oversized shaft that you can buy, and it's reasonable. So I may just end up doing that. Now, when I look at these surfaces here where the pedals actually ride up on these cams, somebody's actually repaired this rather than replace it. And so, again, that's the cause of having to deal with odd band wear. So those will need replaced. This bearing looks good, and it fits pretty nice and tight, so no real worries there. And we can see inside, it's our clutch again. So when you push down, normally it's in this position, and when you push down, you see how it rotates and pushes that shaft in, and actually pushes it in against the spring, and tightens that the band tightens up. Now, the way it was, in order to get the bands tight enough to actually work, they really were actually dragging on the drums themselves. So, of course, that'll create heat, premature wear. Probably is a reason I have a cracked reverse drum. Then we get down here to this is the pin here for the pickup there on the mag. So it's pretty worn. I'm just going to go ahead and replace that as well. Other than those little details, things don't look too bad. It's not all cracked and broken or anything like that up here. So I'm gonna put them in the blaster and get them all cleaned up, and then I'm gonna have to get that pin out of this shaft so that I can pull this out of the hogshead. Now so when I finally get this apart, then we can move on to getting the pedals all lined up and straight the way they ought to be. So if you want to get into something like this yourself, there's really a lot to it. And if you go ahead and search YouTube for Model T engine repair, Model T transmission repair, there's some good information on YouTube. In fact, there's a website that gets in 30-some videos on just how to restore a Model T and engine and transmission, and a lot of the steps to go through, and a lot of good suggestions. So this is what could go wrong with a 90-year-old car.